Trump 5G push could hamper forecasting of D3adly storms. Los Angeles as atmospheric rivers dumped record volumes of rain on California this spring. Emergency responders used the federal government's satellites to warn people about where the storms were likely to hit hardest. Many government scientists say such warnings may become a thing of the past if the Trump administration's Federal Communications Commission pushes forward with plans to auction off radio frequency bands adjacent to one that weather forecasters use. In May, the FCC finished accepting bids on a radio frequency bandwidth that agency officials say will enable U.S. companies to compete in the 5G wireless field, which offers the tantalizing prospect of a much faster, more reliable cell phone signal. Nearly 30 that band 24 GHz sits right next to one that federal scientists use to detect water vapor emissions in the atmosphere. Officials with NASA that will make it difficult for them to monitor, predict, and forecast hurricanes and dangerous weather events such as California's atmospheric rivers, said Marty Ralph, a research meteorologist at Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego. The science agencies aren't suggesting the FCC stop pursuing 5G in the 24 GHz band. Instead, FCC officials set a standard they believe will keep the 5G noise quiet enough for NOAA and NASA to keep hearing atmospheric water vapor. But the federal science agencies say it's not enough by a factor of 5,000. In May, Neil Jacobs, NOAA deputy administrator, told a congressional committee that the FCC's move threatens to kill 77% of the data the agencies acquire from their passive microwave sounding instruments and degrade forecasting accuracy by 30%. NASA's administrator, Jim Bridenstine, was even more cautionary at an agency town hall meeting in April. He told the audience, many of the satellite measurements are made over the ocean, where ground-based measurements aren't available and where ocean. In California, those measurements are crucial. Atmospheric such forecasts are also essential for water managers, who must balance decisions on reservoir levels, Ralph said. If a forecast the importance of listening to water vapor was underscored by NOAA's Jacobs. He testified that both NOAA and NASA were vocal this spring about their concerns, but neither agency made experts available this month to comment for this story. In the meantime, officials from the telecommunications industry and PI, who previously worked as Associate General Counsel at Verizon Communications Incorporated, say the science agencies are going overboard, that the FCC has placed protections in its licensing requirements to prevent interference. They also argue that the protections NOAA and NASA seek would hobble the promise of 5G technology. PI noted the proposed limit is the same one that the FCC has used for decades. If the federal side, the FCC and cellular industry have also criticized the studies NOAA and NASA have prepared on the issue, which they describe as fundamentally there. That's not how the NOAA sees it. According to Jacob, both the Navy and NASA have concurred with his agency's analysis, he said, and considering that NASA sent. Critics say the administration's push for high-wave frequency 5G has divided federal agencies and left the United States without a unified position on 5G deployment as it prepares to negotiate with South Korea, France, and China at the UN's World Radio Conference this fall in Egypt, the world's forum for setting international spectrum standards. Most other nations, On Tuesday, Republic. Eddie Bernice John, Experts from both sides agree the matter is not likely to go away soon. More auctions are, radio. Visit the Los Angeles Times at
Raindrop, truck top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. I get fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park,